Here's Johnny. Hey guys, Holy Critic back with you today, and as you can see, I'm recording during the daylight hours for the first time because last night I watched Dr. Sleep, and I had a bit of a rough night, let's just say that, and I think it's better to record now because I'm going to be too tired to gather my thoughts later on in the evening. So I was compelled to see Stephen King's Dr. Sleep because up until only about a few months ago, I'd actually never heard of this movie before. I'm not really a big avid Stephen King reader, but I hadn't realized that he'd made a book which was a sequel to the 1980s Shining, and it had finally been adapted to the screen by Mike Flanagan, who's pretty well renowned as an up-and-coming horror director. And I thought, The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, possibly, for me, the greatest horror movie of all time. The most terrifying horror movie of all time, outside of maybe The Exorcist or my personal favourite, John Carpenter's The Thing. That movie made a huge impression on me when I was 13 years old, and my love for cinema and my love for Stanley Kubrick came from that movie, and after that I watched every one of his other movies and haven't looked back since. But I thought, how could they screw up a sequel to The Shining? Well, do we really need a sequel? Probably not. But the idea of Danny Torrance, what happens to Danny Torrance after he escapes his father, dies in a maze, freezes to death? That would be so traumatizing for any boy. I always wondered what would have came of Danny Torrance after him and Wendy fled the Overlook Hotel. And this movie, Dr. Sleep, pretty resoundingly answers that question. Ewan McGregor plays Danny, and he basically becomes his father. He has what we would call post-traumatic stress disorder after those events, as you'd expect, and he ends up hitting the bottle and living a very debauched lifestyle, sleeping around, just careless, depressing lifestyle. And eventually he finds direction in his life and gets things together. He finds an identity, gets a job, and he gets contacted out of the blue by this girl named Abra, who's got the gifting of the Shining, probably even more powerful than he himself when he was younger. And she can see visions of some horrific events that are unfolding across America. This gang called True Knot, who are basically roaming gypsies, roaming pedophiles, looking to steal the essence of children. It's very, very scary. And I literally hadn't seen any reviews, hadn't seen any, except maybe one trailer, one of the teaser trailers, because obviously I'm fascinated to see how the two movies connect up. And this story that's unique in and of itself, it has nothing to do with the original Shining. You never heard of this group before. It's so terrifying to see these procurers of children going across the country in their caravans, looking for children with the same ability as Danny, this telekinesis, telepathy, I don't know what you'd call it. But this God-gifted ability to be prophetic, to see the future, to speak minds, read minds, and things like that. And they want to get these children. They want to steal their essence, and they're almost like vampires. And Danny, who doesn't want anything to do with The Shining, he just wants to live his life in peace, is brought right back into the horrors that he's long buried away in his past. And he has to bring all that to the forefront to confront these monsters, these roaming demons. And I've got to say that although the movie stands in its own right, it's its own story, it's only got a loose connection to the original, a very important connection to the original, but still loose. this is my favorite horror movie of 2019, without a doubt. Midsummer was a disappointment. Pet Sematary sucked. What was the other ones that I mentioned? It Chapter 2, that was hugely disappointing. Well directed, but hugely disappointing. This movie, which I hadn't even heard of until it was announced a few months ago, this movie should have made my top 5 list. It is absolutely fantastic. You have to see Dr. Sleep. It honors the original without trying to succeed it, trying to surpass it. It strikes the perfect balance between the original and this new story. Which, if you are a lover of horror movies, you'll love this movie. You hate horror movies, if you didn't like the original Shining, you'll hate this movie. If you've never seen the original Shining, you'll be lost. You have to have seen the original Shining to appreciate the meticulous detail they went into making Dr. Sleep. And the character who really sold the story for me was Rebecca Ferguson, who played a character called Rose the Hat. And what gave her the X factor for me is that she's this very attractive, young woman who you wouldn't expect to be so malevolent, so psychopathic. And she confronts these gifted children, and obviously she lulls their insecurity, because you wouldn't expect a woman, a beautiful woman, someone who would be a lovely mother, to turn and grab you and pull you in. She's like a black widow. And for me, she was the best character in the story, the most convincing character in the story. Ewan McGregor was good. He showed the full range of emotion as you'd expect Danny would have after the trauma he went through. But this character here, Rebecca Ferguson, I'm trying to think, has there ever been a female villain before? I'm trying to think, is there a female villain that I've seen before in a movie? I can't think of one right now. Maybe a witch, but this character here stands in her own right. She'll go down in cinematic history as probably in the top 5 female villains of all time. Maybe along the lines of, they're not even horror movies, but I was thinking movies like Nurse Ratched from, the one that flew over the cuckoo's nest. She was so evil, that nurse. But this character here, this vampiric character, is so terrifying, and she can just get into your mind. She's so charismatic, so sophisticated, and yet so evil. This for me sold the story. Every scene she was in, I was riveted. I was on the edge of my seat. But the problem was with the movie, nobody went to see it. It was actually, I went with my mate Jamie on Tuesday. Literally we were the only 2 people in the entire cinema. And I was like, surely, The Shining, everybody's seen The Shining. I know it was 36 years ago or whatever, or 39 years ago, I should say. But there was literally nobody in the cinema. It was just me and him, which made it probably even more terrifying, because there's no comfort. It was just me and the screen in front of me, and I was so terrified because it brought back all the memories I watched when I first watched The Shining when I was 13 years old. But I come to find out that this movie is a flop. It doesn't deserve to be a flop, guys. You have to see this movie. If you love The Shining, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to love Dr. Sleep. But right now, as we stand, the movie is making nothing. $14 million domestically in the US. That's terrible. And maybe that comes down to the fact that it's released after Halloween. The Joker dominated cinemas, and I love the Joker, but this movie is better than the Joker. This movie deserves to be a massive hit, massive blockbuster, but everybody's missed it. And I don't know why. It's a classic. This movie will go down in history as a classic horror movie. Better than anything in probably the last decade. It surpasses, I can't think of any movie. Can you think of a horror movie that's impressed you in the last 10 years? Maybe The Babadook, the Australian, I can't think of any movie quite on this level that, without the stupid gimmicky jump scares and the gore, this movie doesn't have anything like that. It's all psychological. It's a psychological horror movie that has obviously supernatural elements to it, but it's so convincing. You don't think, oh, they're trying to be all hokey like It Chapter 2. It was just silly CGI, monsters and ghoulies and goblins jumping out. It's nothing like that. This movie honors the original while standing in its own right. You have to go see this movie. It deserves to be seen. The director clearly was an aficionado of Stanley Kubrick, because he everything from the cinematography, from the lighting, the music, everything, they match up to the original without obviously completely plagiarizing it and being derivative of it. It stands in its own right. You must see this movie, guys. If I had to give it a rating, 4.5 Halos out of 5. It's got a few minor issues at the end when they go back to the Overlook Hotel, and it's sort of it tries to have a bit of the ending's a bit too neat for me in terms of they had to rush it slightly with Danny and the history with his father Jack, and there's some characters that come back. I won't go into it, but there's some characters that come back from the original. I thought there was a little bit too heavy-handed, but overall, I thought this movie was fantastic. You have to go see it. I don't know how many times I'm going to repeat myself here. All right, guys. Well, I think I've shared enough of my own thoughts for now, but I want to turn it over to you. What did you think of Dr. Sleep? Have you seen it already? Haven't you seen it? Are you going to see it? Share them below, guys. I love to read your feedback as always. Just don't blame me if you can't sleep the night after watching it. You've been warned. Anyway, leave a big thumbs up on this video if you've enjoyed watching it. And this is Holy Critic, signing out.